To achieve green, healthy cities, we have to have an urban environment that ensures human sustainability, economic sustainability, and ecological sustainability. And human sustainability means a good social and physical health for all, for old and young, rich and poor. In other words, health equity, and a special emphasis for us on the well-being of children, because they are the ones who must grow up healthy in order to carry this sustainability into the future. We need economic sustainability, and that means a city economy that grows at a pace that ensures a living wage for all and that does not enrich the few at the expense of the majority. And an ecological sustainability that means an urban form that does not deplete the earth, that does not require vast energy resources to build and maintain, and does not cause massive pollution and climate change in the construction process. However, these are good goals, but there are massive forces that prevent us from achieving the goals. In city making, there are two competing value systems at work. The main value system is the GDP. Everything is measured against the GDP. It's an economic measure, and this measures the rate of increase in economic growth. The city is seen as an economic engine, and it's assumed that this benefit will trickle down. The second value system is based on the quality of life indices. And in this model, the function of the city is, as Lewis Mumford said, the care and culture of human beings and of the earth. The GDP goal is to increase, maximize economic growth, as I said, and the best way to do that is through construction. The construction industry creates wealth faster than any other industry. The more you build, therefore, the higher, the faster the economic growth will increase. And we experienced this pressure in the 50s through urban sprawl. This was a way to raise the standard of living and to ensure a house for everyone and a car for everybody and a refrigerator and a washing machine, everything that you had to have to live independently. And those principles are obviously by now extremely unsustainable, extremely damaging to health and quality of life. Since urban sprawl has received so much criticism from all aspects, from the sustainability aspects and from health aspects, the construction industry has turned to an even more effective, efficient way of increasing growth, and that is by vertical sprawl. And you'll hear Patrick Condon talk about vertical sprawl later in the conference. In many parts of the world, we saw horizontal sprawl at first, like in North America and Australia, and the damage that it did to the people who were left home alone, isolated in the houses. At first, that was the housewives, and they suffered greatly from social isolation and became depressed and turned to alcohol and perhaps visited the psychologist and were prescribed drugs, Miltown and then Valium. Valium became mother's little helper. And nowadays, of course, in urban sprawl, we have children who are the most affected, who are suffering from isolation and growing up without social skills and so on. But now we have the same phenomenon in vertical sprawl. So extreme capitalism creates a consumer society fueled by social fragmentation and isolation. The more isolated you feel, the sadder you feel, the more you turn to technology to satisfy this hunger for social contact, and the more you consume goods in order to satisfy this need for love. It's a vicious cycle. But, of course, the GDP increases with all of these problems. So Singapore was meant to be a model for the Asian world as how the capitalist system and the GDP measure of success would be very beneficial for Asia, and they, of course, being limited in the amount of land that they have available, built vertically, more and more so as the decades went on. Of course, construction and consumption increased carbon dioxide emissions, and in 2010, they were the top carbon dioxide emitter in Asia Pacific. It's now been superseded, of course, by China. But Kakabadze, the World Wildlife President, said Singapore is a society that maybe is one of the best examples of what we should not do because of all of the associated problems. Well, we know what's happened to China. We know that they embraced the GDP concept and wanted to increase standard of living very, very fast and built hundreds of ghost cities throughout China as a way of simply increasing the GDP. And the buildings became investment opportunities for people. So they thought that this would go on forever. Now we know that that's not going to go on forever. Meanwhile, they have created very, very damaging air condition problems, which threatens their health. And Hong Kong, which was another model for China of the great capitalist system at work, the argument has always been, well, if we build more housing, it will get cheaper. Yes, well, we know that that doesn't happen. It's now the least affordable housing in the world in Hong Kong, and prices have risen 120% since 2008. And the realization that you just build more and more high-rise housing to make affordable housing, it does not work anywhere. New York also, for many years, thought, well, we'll just argue that we'll build more housing and it'll go higher and we'll have more affordability and that we'll be able to house more people. But of course, this is not happening. These high-rise buildings are more expensive to construct, and therefore they increase the land prices around because you can make such huge profits from them. And these are becoming investment opportunities for people around the world. And New York, these new buildings are safe deposit boxes in the sky. This is what they're building. This is not where people are going to be living. This is not going to solve the New York housing problem. It's just going to be a place where global investors store their money. Extreme capitalism increases inequity, causing social and economic instability. Read Thomas Piketty. It's very important if you haven't read him. But this is really just speculation. This does not increase the livability of a city. This is built to increase the financial wealth of a limited number of people. There's a great competition around the world to build the highest building in the world. It's a symbol of power and wealth. Currently, the Burj Khalifa in Dubai is the tallest building in the world, but at the same time, they have more than 25% of the population living in poverty. So profit is privatized and loss is socialized. European cities until now have protected the quality of life in their cities. But I say until now because in Paris right now there are architects, the famous architects are begging to be allowed to build high-rise houses, high-rise towers in the historic city of Paris. And there is a great debate. The current mayor is in favor of building skyscrapers in the historic fabric. And of course, you know what has already happened to London and the 160 skyscrapers that are on the books already to be built in London. So London has already lost that fight. But our investments in cities are totally unbalanced. There's an overinvestment in the private realm, in private property, and an underinvestment in the public realm. The streets, the spaces that belong to everybody, There's no attention being paid to that. There's no investment in making them places where that everybody can share. All the money is in the buildings. And we've seen this happening slowly in America over decades, where the streets have become impossible for human beings, impossible for the pedestrian or the bicyclist, really just spaces for vehicles to move. And this, of course, is extremely unhealthy. We know this. And it has resulted in this epidemic of obesity, which has hit the United States and many other countries around the world. If Dick Jackson were here, he would speak a lot about these issues in particular, because it was he who raised awareness, first of all, a decade ago or more, about the connection between urban sprawl and public health, and the fact that obesity is increasing at an alarming rate because the streets are not walkable, because children can't play out of doors, because the streets are not safe, because they can't walk or bike to school. And as a result of obesity, we have all of these chronic diseases, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, apnea, sleep apnea, asthma, and liver diseases, which are all in the past diseases of old age and are now diseases of childhood. But it's not just the United States and Australia and Canada that are suffering from this, but in fact it's global. And the highest obesity rates are now in the United Arab Emirates, where the obesity rate is double the world average. High rise, as I said, increases social isolation just as suburban sprawl does. And the people who are most at risk are elders who cannot get out of their home so easily, who cannot look out of the window and see another human being, who cannot lean out of the window and wave to somebody they know. Children who need to develop independence, who need to be able to explore and get out of their home and exercise, and in a high-rise building they're not given the freedom to just go outside. They can't go into the elevator because they might disappear if they go into the elevator alone. So children are at risk from social isolation. And of course, young mothers who are looking after the children and having to deal with the children's desperation and need to be independent, and who themselves can't spend all of their time going with their child to the park or the playground. So these are the three groups of people who are most at risk from the configuration of high-rise buildings as suburban housing. And as a result of this, children become lonely and depressed and shy, and they have poor social skills because they don't have enough interaction with community and with friends. But of course, we have invented, the pharmaceutical industry has invented a number of new medical conditions. Social anxiety is now a medical condition. It means shyness, but that can be medicated, and that's great for the GDP. The pharmaceutical industry is a powerful way of increasing the GDP. Social skills are lacking in children who are brutalized and bullied by their friends, and also the bullies themselves don't have good social skills, because if they would, they would know how to deal with and how to interact with somebody who is different from themselves. So, but again, that's very good for the GDP. Builds an army, the kinds of people who can, fight and also perhaps become criminals, and that's good for the prison industry. Okay, to counteract all of this, what we need to pay attention to is the public realm. It's the public realm that is the key to quality of life, the key to social interaction, social skills, community building, democracy building. It's the public realm that we have to pay attention to. So there are many alternatives around now to the GDP as a model. There's the quality of life indicators that was started by Hazel Henderson many decades ago. the Canadian Index of Well-Being. Bristol has its own Happy City Index, and we'll hear about that in this conference. And the IMCL has developed quality of life indicators over the years. And I won't go into all the details. That's in your little booklet, which you should have in your package. But the goal of the city in this model is to increase quality of life, not merely the standard of living, and to focus on health and well-being and sustainability. We break down these principles into 4 categories to simplify it. First of all, facilitate access to community social life. We need that social life, and we need to be able to participate in it. Facilitate access to nature. There are all of these studies now that show how important nature is to human health, as well as how important it is to get people involved in nature to protect it in the future. We need to facilitate independent mobility. That means by foot and bike, and especially for children and elders. And we need to maintain a human-scale, mixed-use built environment, because that is the way to achieve these other 3 goals. And I'll run through each of these very fast. You've heard about the social immune system, I expect. You know, we all have a physical immune system which allows us to resist infections. There is also a social immune system, and that means that the people who have strong social networks, who have a lot of friends and neighbors, who see people face to face every day for a little talk, a little discussion, perhaps waving to each other on the street or stopping for a conversation, catching up on news. People like that with a strong social network don't get sick so often. The social studies have discovered. And if they get sick, it's not so serious. And they also live to a riper old age than people without good social networks. So the social immune system is very, very important. How do you develop that? Through the public realm. You have to have places for social life, places where everybody can come together, where children and infants and teenagers and students and parents and elders and working people and non-working people, everybody can interact and have contact with each other. We don't all have magnificent city squares like Piazza del Campo, and that is one of the most powerful democratic mechanisms for developing community. In our studies of cities, Siena has come out as having the strongest sense of community of any city in the world that we've studied. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they have this magnificent piazza at the heart. It's a long story, I won't go into it. But we need squares at the center of our cities that at least are a symbol and a place where we come for festivals and communities and to gather everybody together, and where the community can say, this is us, this is our sense of identity. Years ago, Portland, Oregon, where I live now, decided that the community decided they did not want a new parking garage to go up in the center of the city. They wanted instead a piazza, a square, and they fought to get Pioneer Square, and that's it. And it's very, very important. But we also need neighborhood squares. We need places in every neighborhood where people who live there can come together, can meet, where children can play, where elders can walk, and people can do shopping, and you pass through on your way to work or to school, and there's a little interaction, and you recognize people, and you get to know people, and that's the key for developing community and social interaction. It's especially important, as I said, for elders, because their natural social networks are disintegrating. The spouse may have died, they no longer work, the children may have moved away. So being able to go out shopping together, or meet people in the public realm, or to meet and play chess, or have a cup of coffee together is really important for elders. So the public realm must be very good for them. Children need, as Peter Benson said, a web of sustained adult relationships. They must grow up within this social web. They need a community, in other words, of people of all different ages that they can lean on as they're growing up. Even before a child can talk, there's a lot of communication that goes on, that can go on between an infant and friends, strangers, people who are friends of the parents, and so on. The child picks up ways of understanding who a person is through nonverbal communication at that age. And so the public realm is really important for little children. The public realm in the community, in the neighborhood, becomes the community's living room. And that is why we found Venice in the early days so important for understanding all of this, because the campi are the community living room. This is where the children come out to play, where families come and sit and talk, where conversations happen as people are moving through the space. It's really used as an extension of the home and as a place where the community develops their sense of identity together. And in order for that to work, it needs eyes on the square, Jane Jacobs again, people living over the shops who maintain jurisdiction over the place and who make the place feel safe. It needs attractions, primarily places where you can obtain food in one form or another, farmers markets or little shops that sell food, or cafes and restaurants which make the space also safe at night and provide a reason for people to gather. The spaces must be hospitable, and that means they must have places to sit, both in the sun and the shade, places that are free. You don't have to buy a coffee to sit there. Shelter from the sun and the rain, light, trees, perhaps some flowers, perhaps the sound of water, maybe even the sound of music occasionally. They must have beloved features, so public art that children can relate to, that parents can say, this is the story of our city, or this is the story of our neighborhood, this is where this used to happen, and the children can climb on and get to love and understand. Some little water feature that children can play in, doesn't have to be big, and special architectural features such as beautiful signs or beautiful architectural details. There must be a sense of place, and that's obtained by having perhaps one beautiful building with a beautiful facade onto the square, by having paving that is walkable, that is designed for the pedestrian, not for the automobile. That's Freiburg, both of those on the left. That's the city hall at the top and the paving in Freiburg on the left. And a sense of a threshold as you're entering a square that you go through, as it were, a doorway, and then you suddenly come out into this community room, a sense of enclosure. And you need events that bring people into the public space to get them accustomed to being in public with each other. And this is Bristol's Make Sundays Special, thanks to George Ferguson. That's just up the hill from here. And you need community participation, as Janet Askew mentioned, in all forms. And this is in Portland. This was started by a neighborhood who decided to take back the intersection by getting the neighbors together to paint the intersections as a message to cars that that space does not belong to you, it belongs to us, and slow down. Okay, we need to facilitate contact with nature. And we need pedestrian routes in nature, ways of getting around the city on foot or by bicycle, through nature, to go to school or to go to work, through a park, very calming, good beginning to the day, to the working day, very calming going home through nature. And nature can be all over the city. It doesn't just have to be in parks. It can be on roof gardens and terraces and little backyards, spaces between the buildings, and across streets. Those are both from Freiburg's old city. The more nature we can have in the city, the better it is for the quality of the air and for the pleasure of being in the public realm. children really need activity in nature, and they also need to be able to engage with nature in all kinds of ways. So children need to be able to climb trees and run and jump in green areas, but they also need to be able to just discover the ants and the beetles and name trees and birds and so on. If children study nature, they will increase their vocabulary more than if they study any other subject. Interesting fact. We've known for millennia, probably, that nature is important for health and well-being. This is why Europe has so many spa towns, where the treatment, which Germans especially are able to benefit from, they are given the prescription of go to a spa town for a week or 2 weeks, walk in the parks, breathe the fresh air, be in beautiful architectural surroundings, and drink the healthy water. But even studies show that somebody who looks out of their apartment window and sees a tree, that is beneficial to health. There's so many studies now that show that nature is important for health. We need community gardens, places where children can learn that if they pull up a carrot and eat it immediately, it tastes very different from the canned or the frozen carrots, and that they learn how to take care of nature and become interested in nature and become the tenders of nature in the future, and where community can be built through participation in community gardens. There are so many areas of cities that are food deserts, and those areas need community gardens and farmers markets and fresh food to be accessible. There's an enormous amount of work to be done to make that possible in so many of North American cities especially. We need to protect nature and ensure its accessibility, not only to enjoy it, but also to be healthy. The air and the water must be clean and must be enjoyable and healthy for us. And that means that we must pay attention to regional planning. We must protect green boundaries to the city, protect nature, and maintain a compact urban fabric in order to do that. Third principle, facilitate independent mobility. The first principle is balanced transportation planning. That means, first of all, that we have to pay attention to the trips that everybody makes, children, elders, not only the people going to and from work, all the trips people make, whether it's to school or work or to go shopping or to go to the movie or to visit a friend next door, and make sure that those trips are all as healthy and affordable and pleasurable and convenient as possible. So children need to be able to get outside and move around in their neighborhood as soon as they possibly can, and this kind of design is a very good way of enabling that in a suburban environment, to have little pedestrian ways between houses where children can play safely away from traffic. Streets need to be walkable and bikeable for children, we all know this. But also they need to be socially safe, and that means we need to have eyes on the street and people on the street. We need to have active facades and stoops and sidewalk cafes and parklets. We need to have streets that are play streets occasionally. The mayor's daughter is very active in promoting play streets in Bristol. And we need pedestrian networks. It's not enough just to have an island, a pedestrian island in the city, but that has to be developed throughout the city, ways of getting around the city without cars. And it must be within an urban fabric that is safe and walkable and mixed use. We need Wohnstraße or living streets, where the traffic is slowed down, preferably to walking speed, where it's allowed through, but it's not going to use that street as a shortcut, where you can only park if you live there or are delivering there, and where children may be playing in the middle of the street and So children and pedestrians have as much right of way to that street as the cars do. We need to do more traffic calming in arterial roads to transform a street like the one on the bottom left into the top right. That's a transformation that took place in San Diego. We need to encourage cycling because not only is it healthy, but it's also socially healthy. It allows people to stop and talk and meet with people who are pedestrians. George is again a great proponent of cycling and encouraging people to take their bike and encouraging more people to use the bicycle. We need to get children and elders, and these are some slides, a couple of them from Sven. Until we get children and elders bicycling, we're not going to have really a bicycle friendly city. And this you will see later, that's the bicycle network in Freiburg. You'll hear from Sven. So safe bicycle networks, this is all the great model from Freiburg, but the buffered bicycle networks are really important, keeping the pedestrians and the cyclists and the cars all separate as much as possible, because that's the way of making it safe for everybody. And we need public transit for children as well as for other people, and as a social mix, as a way of getting rich and poor, famous and not famous together in the same public realm, interacting with each other. And you know who that is. Superman. You recognize him in the top picture. Our great hero, the writer of the recent encyclical. Okay, we need to maintain the fourth principle, a human-scale, mixed-use built environment. We need continuous human-scale urban fabric. We have to stop thinking about a city as being individual monuments standing alone. We have to get back to thinking about the city as a continuous urban fabric that frames public spaces and that creates internal, more private, semi-public spaces within the urban fabric. This is Plessis-Robinson. If you haven't visited next to Paris, near Paris, all new, but an immensely important model. They provide inner courtyards, places that can be used by children or by people in a more private public setting. We need mixed use and mixed income, and preferably within the same buildings, not just one building for the rich and one building for the poor. The old traditional fabric of the city, that's how it was structured, of course, with a shop or workshop at ground floor, with the wealthy merchant family living above in the high-ceilinged rooms, and the people who worked for the merchant living on the upper floors in small apartments with low ceilings. But we can do this sort of mix again. It doesn't have to be exactly like that, but the building on the right is actually the building I live in Portland. It has shops and restaurants at ground floor, and it has a mix of everything from small studios to 2- and 3-bedroom apartments and condos. And so you get a very, very varied mix of income groups living in that building. We can do it. We need a mixture of shops and restaurants within walking distance, obviously. Paris is a great example for that. We need to protect small businesses, so the economy has to be controlled so that prices of business property doesn't increase at a rapid rate, so that we can protect the small businesses, because they're the real economic engine of a livable city. We need active street-level facades, so open to the street, open to the sidewalk, a lot of events happening, even with residential housing. We need permeable upper facades, again, eyes on the street. And we need to create a city of short distances, die Stadt der kurzen Wege, complete village communities that allow everybody to live within a 10-minute walking radius, ideally not only of the shops and the school, but also of the place that they work, if that is possible, and a mix of population groups. Squares for people within walking distance of everybody, nature integrated, that's again Plessy Robinson, nature integrated. We need beauty and human scale, that's Richmond on Thames at the top, and Carmel, Indiana, which we will hear more about from Mayor Brainerd in the conference. It's a brand new city center, believe it or not. We need to maintain the DNA of a city. This is Portland, Oregon. Portland is a port city, a city built on the timber industry, has a lot of brick warehouses, and so that's the way of maintaining the character of Portland, by having buildings that are human scale and with a lot of balconies, built of brick and open to the trees, and protecting the trees as a view of, from the apartments. We need to protect the cultural identity of our cities with historic and new buildings that carry the identity of the city forward. So this is what we're talking about, quality of life. It's not just about the GDP. We must maintain quality of life. Thank you very much.